This model shows the entire renal system. So we have the two kidneys, and draining each kidney is a ureter that comes down into the urinary bladder. And we can see the internal architecture. So this area would be our renal cortex, that very thin, darker rim. And then this is going to be the area of the renal medulla. Of course, you can see individual renal pyramids here. And then we see the drainage system. At the tip of each renal pyramid will be a minor calyce. Minor calyces will join together to form major calyces. Major calyces will unite to form a renal pelvis, which is hard to see. It's covered by the vasculature. And then the renal pelvis will come out as a ureter, and that's what brings the urine down into our urinary bladder. You can also very nicely see the blood supply of the kidney, at least the larger vessels. So we're seeing the abdominal aorta, and you can see the renal arteries coming off, and then we see the inferior vena cava. This is going to drain the venous blood back in. These are renal veins that come back into the inferior vena cava. Other structures that we can see, of course, we see our two adrenal glands. Those are endocrine organs. And when we come down and look at the bladder, this is the anterior view. These are the two pubic bones, and this is a pubic symphysis joint. So you see how that bladder has a little bit of protection from the bones. All right, so we're looking at the model from the posterior view. Again, this is our urinary bladder. We can see the ureter coming out from the kidney down to the bladder. And I'm going to zoom in on the bladder area. I've zoomed in so we can just see the bladder area because there are some important structures you can see. Remember, this is our posterior side of the bladder. I'm going to open up the bladder, and you can look inside, and you notice that in the floor of the bladder there's this white triangle. This is the trigone. And at the two corners here, that would be where the two ureters would enter into the bladder. Of course, there are little flaps of mucosa there that cover those openings. And this is going to be the third point in the trigone. This is going to be opening into the urethra, which will take the urine to the outside of the body. Now, this is a male bladder, and the way that we know that, just ignore the metal bar here, but when you look at the bladder, you see several structures in the male reproductive system. First of all, this lighter colored structure, this is the prostate. Remember, it sits underneath the bladder, and as we saw, the urethra runs through the prostate gland. And then we see these orange structures. These are the two seminal vesicles. The white tubes here are the two vas deferens, or the ductus deferens, and of course they would continue along this lateral side of the bladder and eventually out from the pelvic cavity, but we only see little stumps of them here.